I grabbed some wood from Dollar Tree and I had a few ideas, so let's turn them into something beautiful. For this first project, I'm using 3 of these small Dollar Tree crates. They actually come in a few different styles, and I wanted the ones without the side handles. I'm going to paint them, and I'll be mixing a couple of colors together to get the shade I'm going for, kind of like a light antique blue. I'm starting with Celery by Waverly as my base, then adding a little ocean for that bluish tone. Once that's all mixed up, I'm brushing that onto the wood, and it really is such a beautiful color. It will darken just a little as it dries. I'll be stacking and gluing these together, so I did avoid painting the outer long sides on a couple of them since that's where I'll be adding glue. And for the ones that will be on the ends, I did go ahead and paint the base. I'm just applying some hot glue along those unpainted sides and then stacking them together, holding everything tightly for a bit to help avoid any gaps. And now I have this cute little shelf ready for the next step. Now I'll be using these rub-on transfers that I got on Amazon. I've used this brand before and really love how they look and apply, so I'll have that link below. And this is the French Market Peonies design. And so I'm just cutting out the part that I want. Initially, I wanted the design to extend a little onto the inside sides of the crate, but because the transfer is a bit thick, I just couldn't really get it pressed down properly, so I ended up trimming it down a bit more to fit. So this comes with a little transfer tool, and you just rub over the design, then slowly lift the clear sheet as you go. And these really do transfer beautifully. So I'm just doing the same thing with the next crate, picking out a design I like, cutting it out, and applying it the same way. This little flowers in the pail design, isn't it just the cutest thing? And for the center, I wanted to use this larger, lush floral design since I thought it would make a pretty focal point. And a little tip, if any part doesn't transfer, just lay it back down and keep rubbing a little more before lifting again. Okay, now to make these glued sections look a little more finished, I'm trimming down and painting some small wood strips, which are actually just coffee stir sticks. This step is totally optional, but my crafty brain said we can make this look better, so that's what I'm doing. And so I'm just gluing those right over the joints to clean everything up a bit. Now I thought I'd add some legs underneath, and I started with these wooden angels from Dollar Tree. It was nice, but I ended up switching it to these shorter wood beads, and I like that better. I do seal these with a sealer spray, and this one is all done. Whether you use it for a little organization or simply as decor, I think this turned out so pretty. For the next project, I picked up one of these larger wood plaques with a beveled edge from Dollar Tree. These are $3, and I thought this would make a really nice base for a tray. So I wanted to start by staining the wood, and I'm using this water-based stain in the shade Special Walnut. I still wanted some of that wood grain to show through, especially since I knew I'd be adding some decorative details on the top later. I did give this a light sanding earlier, especially around the sides, just to smooth everything out a bit and prep it for staining. So I'm just brushing the stain on and then wiping away any excess with a cloth. After it dried, I did notice some of those lines showing through a little more than I would have liked, but honestly, since I was going for a more rustic look anyway, I decided just to go with it. So next, I'm mixing a little white acrylic paint with water to make a simple whitewash. I brushed that over the top, and I ended up doing 2 light coats, which softened everything nicely while still letting some of that wood grain peek through. Now for the fun part. I thought this large pink floral transfer with the script details around it would look really pretty on top. So I'm just cutting out the part I want to use, peeling off the backing paper, and placing it slightly off to the right because it looked prettier that way. Then same process as before, just rubbing over the transfer and slowly lifting the clear sheet as I go. And if any part wants to be stubborn, I just lay it back down and keep rubbing until it transfers. Once that was all done, I gave it a light coat of matte spray sealer to help protect everything. I'm adding some handles, and I got these on Amazon. They come in a pack of 10, and I'll have that linked below. To make drilling the pilot holes a lot easier, I made a quick little template using a strip of masking tape. I just stuck the bottom of the pulls on the sticky side, and then I poked through the holes to mark where I need to drill. So after the pilot holes were drilled, I screwed the handles in place. I did add some clear adhesive bumpers underneath to help protect whatever surface it's on. And with that, this one is all done. Okay, moving on to the next project, I picked up one of those little wood boxes from Dollar Tree. They had quite a few unfinished wood options, but I thought this one would be fun to dress up a little. So I'm taking a small amount of clay, then pressing it into the mold. I'm really working it in there so it picks up all those little details. So I'm just smoothing off the excess, and honestly, I wasn't totally sure yet which design I'd end up using, so I went ahead and made a few different options. After that, I popped them into the freezer for about 20 minutes, which just makes them a little easier to remove while still keeping some flexibility. Once they've been in the freezer for a bit, I just flip the mold over and they come right out very easily. I decided to go with that larger ornate piece because I thought it would look really pretty on the top of the box. The rest, I'm just going to let that dry and save it for another project. So I'm just smoothing down the sides a little where needed, adding some tacky glue to the back and placing that right on top. Now this particular box didn't have those little latch pieces in the front, and I felt like it needed something. So I decided to go with another mold that was smaller but thicker, and I liked how it looked in the front. But I pushed it forward just enough so the box can still open and close without bumping into it. Then I just let everything dry completely before moving on to the paint. Now that everything's dry, I'm going to paint the whole box in this really pretty muted green shade moss. I did go ahead and remove the little hinges in the back first, just to make painting easier, and then I'm brushing that color all over the outside of the box. I'm also using a little sponge brush to get into all those little tiny details in the mold. Once the outside was painted, I went ahead and painted the inside as well. Once the paint has dried, I thought it needed a little gold, so I'm taking some gold wax on my finger and lightly going over those raised details to help bring them out. After that, I gave everything a light coat of a spray sealer to protect the finish. And this one is all done. Now whether you use it for jewelry, little keepsakes, or just because you wanted a pretty box, I think this one turned out so pretty. For the final project, I'll be using a couple of Dollar Tree's wood planks. These are both around 18 inches long, and I thought these would work nicely for my next idea. I wanted to give this the look of some simple paneling so it didn't feel quite so plain. So I grabbed my screwdriver with a square attachment. Then I'm just placing this long 1x2 inch wood that I had right in the center to use as a straight edge and guide. And I'm scoring down each side, going over it several times to really make those lines visible. And for the other plank, I'm measuring the width of the wider board so I know how long to cut my end pieces. Then I'm trimming 2 pieces to that size using my miter box and saw. After that, I added some wood glue to the back of the cut wood and placed them right on the ends. Then I clamped everything in place and let that dry really well. Now I use wood glue here, but you could definitely use whatever glue you prefer. Hot glue works too. I'll be painting this in the shade Khaki from Craftsmart. I really wanted a nice neutral base because I knew I'd be adding some stenciling on top later. Once that dries, I did a little sanding to distress it a bit, mainly focusing around the edges and those end pieces. After that, I wanted to darken those sanded areas a bit and give it a little more depth. So I mixed some burnt umber acrylic paint with water, lightly wiped that over, and wiped away the excess. Since I'll be adding stencils on top, I didn't want to use antique wax here. I had this floral stencil that I picked up from Walmart a while back, and I've just never gotten around to using it, so today's the day. For the stencil color, I wanted a nice contrasting blue, so I started with Ocean by Waverly, but it was a little brighter than what I had in mind, so I mixed in just a tiny bit of black to deepen it into more of a slate blue. And when stenciling, I like to offload most of the paint from the brush first, so you're working with a pretty dry brush. That helps keep the paint from sneaking underneath the stencil. Then I'm just lightly dabbing the color on instead of brushing it over. And when I peeled that back, oh my goodness, I was genuinely so surprised at how pretty that looked. The color against that neutral background was so beautiful. And honestly, once I saw how nice it looked, I just kept going, adding a few more stencil details here and there with some of the different floral designs. I also carried some of that stencil onto the end wood so everything felt a little more cohesive. At this point, I wanted to add a little of that ornate molding details to the ends. I made a couple of different ones to see which one I like best, then I popped them in the freezer for a bit to help with removal. Once they were ready, I carefully peeled back the silicone, and I was definitely loving this larger, more detailed one. I ended up making two so I could add one to each end. Because this design is a little more delicate, I decided to let it dry out and harden first before gluing it down. You could hang it on the wall, lean it on a shelf, or just use it as a pretty little accent piece next to some greenery or flowers. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you made it all the way to the end, let me know which project was your favorite. I always love hearing from you in the comments. Until next time, bye!